Yeah.
Maybe in demonstrating a few things. So where are you coming from? Where am I coming from on these issues? Maybe we ought to establish that for our audience. And this is not to be self-serving in a way. What we're trying to do here is to be the vicarious communicators for you, so maybe we can talk about some critical communication approaches in how to talk about the issues that are out there, because they need to be discussed. They need to be discussed on this level.
Why do they need to be discussed?
Because we need to flesh them out and understand what is truth and what is total hyperbole.
But why does it matter what we think? Well, I'm saying it matters what we think because we don't live in China and we don't live in Russia. So there's actually at least 2 or 3 people to choose from when we go to vote.
Well, right.
You know, more than one candidate to pick from, then you need to be informed and make a good choice. So that's why we're going to talk about it, because
being informed becomes problematic
for
some reason for us in the United States. And that's another thing that we want to talk about in terms of what are all the media influences that influence us to make
thinking process when it comes to decision making.
Okay.
Yeah, because it does matter, because we do live in a democracy. And by the way, I would like to say, in my opinion, we're all on the same team here. We all have a vested interest in picking the best person to lead our country and the best people to be in Congress, the best people to be in the county commission, our local and state legislatures.
88 Senate congressperson seats are up for election. Have you heard anything about campaigning on that level?
Not really, because this particular presidential election is
it's completely eclipsed anything else that actually really matters in terms
of
how laws are going to be made and how the country is going to be run on at least 2 out of the 3 levels of governance.
Okay, so there is a reason to talk about it. We've established that. And then we also want to talk about how to talk about it. That's equally as important.
Let me back up for a minute here.
Okay.
You came out and said, well, really, I want us all to get along. I'm really in a position of seeing sides. We had a producer at one point, at the beginning of Talking Point 2 years ago, who said, oh, you and I are diametrically opposed, and we'd be good to go through and put together and have this kind of clash. And you're sitting there telling me you're not going to clash?
I'm sitting here telling you that ultimately we're all on the same team. We all have a vested interest in making a good decision. So the reason to talk about it is so we can share perspectives with each other and then vet the facts and look at things from more than our just own limited perspective.
So can we be on the same team and yet not maybe be on the same side in terms of issues?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
yes.
That was the right answer.
Yes, yes, we can, because we don't often agree on things, even though we're on the same team.
Right.
Yes.
So that doesn't mean that just because I don't agree with you, I don't like you.
Right. And that's a nice thing that you're pointing out, because Eric and I are friends, we are colleagues at work, we respect each other and we trust each other. And that's one reason why it makes it possible for us to have some of these conversations that are sometimes a little confrontational.
Yeah. And I kind of poke and prod you a little bit just to maybe raise the passion level on that in terms of what is it that are we
because I'm suspicion of passion. I'm suspicion of elevated emotional.
I don't want any emotion in this at all. And we're going to talk about that, pathos, logos, ethos, and approach to how to go and look at things. A side note here, though, as far as the program is concerned, we're going to not take any breaks unless we really need to, unless we need an actual break to go away, because for one, we don't want to appear that this has any kind of financial backing from anybody. So the breaks we go to are going to be PSAs. And then there might be some times when we need to stop and collect our thoughts and then come back into it.
And there is no financial backing, and our opinions are strictly our own.
We do not represent Dixie State University or the department in which we work.
Right.
We try to be well researched in what it is that we're talking about here on some level.
Yes.
So let me kick this off, if I could, with a little bit of a story, a little anecdote.
Okay.
My spouse and I were taking my father-in-law. We picked him up from a funeral, and we were taking him home. And as we were driving along, of course, he was riding shotgun. My wife is sitting in the back seat, and this is up in Bountiful, Utah, a very conservative place, and my father-in-law, bless his heart, is a very conservative man. I have great respect for him, great love and admiration for this guy, for everything he's done. So we're driving along, and the first thing he says to me, after we settled in and got beyond the pleasantries, was, "So, you going to vote for Trump?"
knowing the answer beforehand.
He did, and he knows where I come from politically, and not that I'm a real left-leaner, but even if I were a right-leaner, I could not possibly, in my wildest imagination, get behind the hyperbole that is Donald Trump. So anyway, and I don't use those words with him, with my father-in-law. I inhaled to go through and respond, and immediately my wife pokes her head right between the two of us. Okay, she undoes her seatbelt, and she gets right between
Mindy's
us,
head, yes,
right there, and she's like, "I love both of you, so we're not going to continue this conversation." Right, she shut it down. Boom, right there.
I bet you a lot of people in our community have this similar experience, right?
Well,
we're not talking about
I wanted to say, no, I think we can carry on a conversation and be civil with each other.
Yeah.
We weren't.
Oh, great. Great.
A couple of statements into that conversation, then, well, you're one of those kinds of people, and you're one of those kinds of people. And we became tribal. We became polarized in what was going on. Why? So you're talking about we can be on the same team but still have differing opinions, but here, just within my own family, totally taboo for me to go through and tell you why we shouldn't be voting for Trump. And in putting that out there, I am labeled with a bias. That, well, that's just your liberal leaning coming in and saying that Trump's no good. But what happens when all the evidence that we have in the rhetoric, in his actions, in his business dealings, what happens when all that evidence actually upholds the accusation?
Well, evidence is a tricky thing because depending on your bias and your point of view and your value system, your tribe, you're going to value some evidence more than other evidence. So person's piece of propaganda.
Or you're going to ignore maybe the evidence.
Absolutely, yeah, you're not going to value the facts or even interpret the facts the same way. But I just want to say on the father-in-law anecdote, oh, there's a fly that's just in love with you. On the father-in-law anecdote, it's interesting because I also had several political engagement conversations with my father-in-law, and who I also love very much and respect. It got to the point where I said with him, I can't talk to you in these generalized ways. I can't talk to you about these big nebulous claims. I said, if we're going to be effective at all, we have to talk about specific incidents or facts. There, I think we can get our heads around it, and we can have an intelligent conversation.
Does somebody who has a steady diet of misinformation like Fox News, and I say news in air quotes, who has that, do they have the ability to get specific, to get away from those types of generalizations and of homeland security?
Right. Well, I will say about Fox News, in parentheses, is that I have to research this a little more, but I read that there was a lawsuit against Fox News on some grounds, and the judge found them not guilty of the violation because technically they're an entertainment network.
Right.
They're not a news network. So they don't have to abide by the same rules as news coverage because they're entertainment, which I thought was an interesting distinction. And we should look at that distinction between, is it entertainment or is it news? Everywhere we get media.
Well, constitutionally, the only thing that's guaranteed is a free press. It doesn't matter really how that content is gathered and portrayed out there, unless, of course, we get into slander, those types of things. But outside of that, what can be misrepresented is really up to the producers and really up to the audience who's going to suck up that crap.
Well, okay, and let's just say that Fox, I think, has proclaimed and been pretty honest about the fact that they feel like they are presenting a particular point of view to point of view that's poisoning the well. I don't think they
is what maybe their bias is.
They might be good people, but I'm not really sure they're doing a lot of thinking. No.
Well, we're going to get some mail on this show, that's for sure.
Right.
Because I know there's some of you out there thinking right now, well, there's MSNBC, and what about Rachel Maddow, and so on and so forth. Right. Yeah, it doesn't matter across the board. In fact, what we want to talk about is where do we go in terms of our media menus to find that information.
Right. Who do we trust and why?
So who is it? Who do you trust?
Who do I trust?
Or do you?
Well, okay, the older I get, the less I trust. The older I get, the more I realize I'm being lied to a lot by a lot of different people. And sometimes they're lying to me without knowing they're lying to me. They're just giving me misinformation because they don't know any better. And a lot of
So who are
times,
these people? These people being
I
pundits?
would,
They're journalists?
I would say, yes, people in the media, but I would just say people in general. A lot of times will tell you something, and it'll be a half-truth because they don't understand the whole picture.
Where are they getting that from?
They're getting that from...
We've lambasted Fox News enough. Where else are they getting that from?
Well, I would say the other media outlets. Here's the thing about who I trust. Like, for example, the New York Times has a large piece of the media landscape in our country, and it's a reputable newspaper. But I have discovered that sometimes in their past they have not covered material, or they have buried it deep in the pages of the newspaper to avoid making it well known to their readership. We had here at DocuTalk a couple of years ago a student film on the New York Times when during World War II, even though the newspaper was owned by a Jewish owner, they buried information about concentration camps and what was going on in World War II deep into the paper.
That's 70 years ago.
But it's a tendency that media has to shine a light on certain things.
No, hold on.
Right?
I'm
and
call you
then
out on that one.
Okay.
Because what you're doing is you're applying old ways of doing things with the New York Times to what their current editorial policy is.
No. I'm just saying that's a tendency that media has as part of it.
Media in general.
Media in general
not
has.
Just the New York Times.
Right, not just the New York Times, but so because they have been guilty of that in the past, okay, now I'm looking to see, well, so could they be guilty of it again? You know, so I don't trust them 100%.
Okay. So what do you do? When you read an article from the New York Times and something comes up that makes you go, what do you do?
Right. Well, then I'm always looking. I think an opposite point of view from what I always feel, naturally, an opposite point of view is a blessing to me. It's a gift, so that it expands what I can possibly see as valid.
So that's what I'm asking specifically. How do you expand that? What do you do?
Okay. Well, so I look for points of view that are different than what I already think.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, I know you're not a social media person.
Right. I just don't find the time.
Okay.
I just don't have time.
And I have to, because I teach social media, and as a result, in going through and looking at how certain algorithms gather information, group of information that gets posted on there, because that's what I'm researching and seeing. Position. So the problem here with social media is, and this goes for any of us who are, and most of us, according to the research, up to a certain age, not my age, okay, but a certain younger age, are finding our news sources strictly through social media.
Yes.
They're not going to traditional media sources that used to have the idea of the fourth estate, meaning it's a fourth arm or branch of government, if you will, that goes through and gives us some kind of check and balance as to what's really what's going on out there. Right. Social media, it's completely aloof or away from that kind of expectation.
And specifically tailored to the users.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So imagine turning on a TV channel where all it did was feed you exactly what you would agree with, or it knows you well enough to know that your political biases are not going to go through and tolerate certain messages, so it keeps those off of your feed.
Right.
So you don't have the diversity of what the entire message might be as a result of that. So we're dumbing down as a populist, as a voting populace.
It's a form of censorship, really.
That's, wow.
Because it's a filter. It's a powerful filter. It censors the information that we are privy to. Wouldn't you say, that little algorithm that delivers your news?
Google and Facebook are censoring information?
I think inadvertently they are.
Interesting.
Yeah, because if the information you're getting when you go on your Facebook is tailored by an algorithm to your purchasing habits, your other personality traits that have been revealed, then by not giving you other information, it's a filter, and a filter is a type of a censor.
And we all then become copper tops for them to capitalize on in sending people who have a specific message focused to those individuals. That's the whole purpose of social media. As much as we'd like to think it's to set up a network of friends and to be able to go through and communicate and exchange photographs and Instagram and everything else, it's not. It's to go through, call together a third of the world's population. Okay,
1 billion plus.
In terms of, in terms of their users, and then separate that population out into micro audiences that can be then directly marketed to, regardless of what that idea, what that communication objective might be.
To be clear, you're saying that social media is a giant marketing mechanism.
Yes, absolutely.
And I would say that mainstream media, they are the parents of the
first generation
giant marketing mechanism. I remember being aghast when I figured out, in my 50s, that the reason for television here was not for my favorite shows like Lassie and Bonanza. It's to sell me products. And they only put on Lassie and Bonanza long enough to keep me watching, so I'll stick around for the commercials.
Right.
That was a little disheartening for me, actually.
They're produced to that end, to get you to come back after the commercial.
Yes.
Back before even the discovery of this, when Edward R. Murrow, who really is the foundation of the Fourth Estate in terms of journalism in America, and again, there's people going to write in about that, but he's sitting there smoking a cigarette, going through his editorial, and that's when tobacco companies went, wait a minute, I think we can kind of capitalize on that whole idea.
Okay.
Why don't we put Lucky Strike ads in, while he's smoking our product? He's really endorsing what's going on. Yeah. So that's really the explosion of taking what the country needs in terms of not a state media, but a people-run media, and then hooking big corporations to that and then mastering the messages. There are 6 large corporations out there that go through and control everything that we're consuming on every level, from social media to traditional media. Yes. So we need to understand that there are those filters in place, that there are those frames in place that will tell a story from a certain angle that is not necessarily the complete story. Now, we're probably not telling you anything new here. If we are, good. Then we're enlightened.
We're just reminding, though.
But there's some other factors, I think, that come into play here.
Okay.
In terms of here lately, is accused of a gaffe.
Right.
What was it that she said? You know this better than I do.
Well, actually, I haven't seen the clip because I don't watch television, really.
Right. Which is ironic, because neither of us watch television in that respect. So.
Right. But I did see about 5 minutes of it last night. But I do think she made a comment about Donald Trump's supporters being
a basket full of
deplorables and some other things.
Half of his supporters are a basket full of deplorables.
Something like that. And can I just say that, I'm not a fan, particularly of her. I don't like people that have their whole lives based around accruing power and position, and political, lifetime career politicians turn me off. There's a lot of reasons why I'm not a fan, but I will say that anyone under the duress that these people are under 24/7 through a campaign could be excused for misspeaking on occasion. So I cut people a little bit of slack, and apparently she's got
by that criteria, you're cutting Donald Trump a whole lot of slack.
I will cut a little bit of slack, not like ultimate,
Do you really think he's under duress?
He seems to be really enjoying the process, actually. I think he likes to be in the limelight. I think he likes to express his point of view.
That.
Yeah, I think he does. So, and
it's sociopathic for him at a level where if it's not on him, he will go through and do and say anything to get it all back to him.
Right, and that's the other thing. That's the reason I'm not a Donald Trump fan. One of the reasons is because I think he wants the job too much. Anybody who wants the job is suspect anyway.
Right.
And he seems to be somebody who's kind of full of himself, I think, a little bit. Yes. Yeah. So, there's reasons why.
So why okay, now we strayed away from where you wanted to go with the whole Hillary thing. I'm going to come back to that. But I have to ask you this question. This is the thing that bothers me the most about media coverage of Trump. Why are you saying that he you're still treating the whole thing with kid gloves, where in fact there's no subtlety about Trump's, I don't know, his campaign, his objective. The first words that we hear when our alarm goes off on our clock radio is Donald Trump.
Okay, how are we doing for time? Because I don't want to launch in.
We're good.
We're good for time.
We're 9 minutes.
Well then, so you're right. There's no subtlety and there's no kind of when it comes to him.
So why isn't that called out? Because there's still this kind of kick glove approach in handling how those messages are
I think because the people that interview him want to appear fair, and they are trying to either mask their personal biases or they are trying to control their personal point
Sure.
of view.
No, I get that.
So they are trying, and they're trying to be respectful. I mean, for heaven's sakes, you know, he's the Republican nominee. I think that mandates a little bit of respect for the person running for the office.
I have,
I know,
not by virtue
yeah.
of the fact that he's a Republican nominee, and I feel truly bad for Republicans at
Well,
this point.
I do too.
He has lost
I do
his
too.
ability to garner respect out
Yeah.
of all the misogyny, all of the racism, all of
Yeah.
the hate mongering. It's tough to go back and say, well, we still owe him, just by virtue of the fact that he's the Republican candidate, some level of respect. I mean, look what people have done with President Obama as the president of the country, as the chief executive, who
completely disagree with denigrating our leaders.
by the same people who
Yeah.
are going through and heralding Trump as the
Right,
second coming.
right. I think it's,
Now, I'm saying
Yeah,
this
yeah.
not from a standpoint of my liberal leanings. I'm saying this from a standpoint of being a media analyst and having to digest this information and pull it into a class discussion and try to go somewhere with that. So
Yes.
I'm hoping to waylay some of
you
the
have a
comments.
tough job because you have to spend all that time reading social media, and I think my brain would explode
After
all
a while,
over the floor.
yeah, I have to take a break.
Yeah,
That's why I go out in
yeah.
the wilderness, away from any signal, and just kind of.
Yeah, I'm kind of a prima donna when it comes to my media menu.
You
I'm,
are.
you know, I like to drink protein drinks and healthy food, you know, and I don't eat a lot of stuff, or I do eat bad stuff in little amounts. It's the same with my media consumption. I'm very picky about what I put into my brain.
Right.
Partly because I'm naturally kind of enthusiastic and maybe a little gullible. So I have to be really careful.
Really?
Yeah.
Your critical shield doesn't prevent you.
You know,
from gullibility?
well, I'm getting less gullible and less trusting, I said, as I get older,
Right.
because I'm getting a little smarter, I think. But I want to talk a little bit about your assessment of Donald Trump, because I think one of the things you're hearkening to is in rhetorical analysis, we go back to Aristotle's 3 elements of persuasion. So we go back to those 3 elements that Aristotle codified, and they are ethos, logos, and pathos. Pathos being an appeal to the emotions, right? And then logos and ethos an appeal to credibility. You know, is the speaker honest and believable? Is the speaker credible? Well, I think I was just looking at Sean Hannity, as my husband was watching the Hannity show last night, and I was watching Sean Hannity interview Donald Trump, and Sean was kind of trying to set him up to be successful with an answer and framing the question in a very articulate way. And then Mr. Trump responded.
He led the witness.
He did.
It's not journalism.
He was trying to be helpful. I mean, clearly. But I will say that when Mr. Trump answered, he spoke in kind of meaningless generalizations and repetitive phrases. It was about
There you go again. Kind of meaningless,
Well,
general,
okay.
repetitive
All right.
phrases.
Definitely.
There's no substance
You're right.
there.
Okay, I appreciate you calling me out on that. You're being good at that.
I'm going to be accused
Yes.
of beating you up on the show.
Yes,
tonight.
you are, but you're such a bully.
Oh.
But what I will say is that when I look at his appeal, I think it rests mostly on the pathos. He appeals, he generates an emotional response. Obviously, he's generated an emotional response in Eric Young, and in the negative.
Across the board,
in the
and
negative.
more with males than females as well.
Yes.
Keep going.
Yes,
I don't want
that's
to take you
okay.
away.
That's okay. So he appeals to us with pathos, with generating an emotional response. And I'll tell you, out of pathos, logos, and ethos, to me that is, because when you get emotional, okay, we have an adrenaline surge. But you do get an adrenaline surge that makes you less intelligent. Okay, and then your decision making becomes more of a response to fight or flight.
So the research shows that men are less intelligent with that surge, and that actually women become more acute.
Yeah, I don't know what you mean by acute. Define that, please, in this context.
They're more definitive in their words that they choose to speak.
Okay.
They become better fighters verbally.
Okay.
They become. But the research indicates that with that endocrine system bump that's going on with them, that women get smarter and men
will do fight or flight, and so yes, they stop thinking with their brains and start thinking with their muscles, something like that. Anyway, back to the approach for
Thinking
analyzing.
with their muscles?
Yes, you know, fight or flight.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yes. Forget that. Forget I said that. Okay, so back to the structure that we want to
Right.
use. So when
Pathos,
we
logos, ethos.
when we go through and we look at the candidates, and Eric, you know, gets very emotional when he's and very adamant
So
about
are
your
you
opinions.
implying that my logos then is obscured by my passion?
I would say that you tend to be passionate and you tend to make a lot of claims about him, and without a lot of logos or supporting
I've done the research.
specifics. Okay.
I can back
so
everything up.
I'm going to ask you to do so. Okay.
Okay.
So when you make a claim about like misogyny or about racism or bigotry, you know, let's just take little pieces and use the logos with the evidence to back them up a little bit.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll put my backup
Yeah.
on our Facebook page. You can find us on Facebook at TalkingPoint Live, Facebook/TalkingPointLive.com, where we put up the kind of research that we're looking at, or maybe even the artifacts that we're being critical of, to go through and make some kind of point along that line.
Because as we are well aware, television does not really support a lot of thinking or a lot of analytical discussion.
TV setup, it's a visual medium, and it's really not set up for us to go through and do anything other than absorb graphics and talking heads that might be on.
Right.
And that's it. There's nothing beyond that. That's why I have a tendency to get most of my information from radio.
Let's talk about where we like to go for information.
Okay,
Some more.
we've got 2.5 minutes left.
Okay, all right. So what radio do you listen to?
I listen to NPR. Specifically, I listen to Bob Garfield and Steve Inskeep.
Now, Bob Garfield is on the media.
He's with On the Media.
Yeah, and why do you like Bob?
Because he pulls no punches. In his interviewing, he doesn't take anything less than a direct response. And if he's getting played in his interviews, he turns that around, puts it right back onto the subject that he's interviewing, and asks for a direct response to what's going on.
Okay.
And so far, I can't tell where. And I like that about him, because typically I would go through and say, so what is your bias coming into the interview? Steve Inskeep, again, just by saying NPR, people go, well, they're a bunch of liberal journalists anyway. But I've done the homework enough to go through and find out what's going on with those two individuals. There is a CNN analyst. I'm trying to remember her name, but it escapes me right now.
Okay, CNN analyst. All right, well, it'll come to you in a minute.
And that hurts me to say CNN as actually having credibility, because they've lost it, I think, at this point.
Okay, why is their credibility been undermined? What's undermined it for you?
Sensationalism.
Okay.
Really, that the network really has been driven to go through and sell product rather than go through and illuminate what's truly going on.
Okay, so sensationalism kind of leans towards the appeal to pathos a little bit,
yes,
and emotion.
Absolutely. No question about that.
Okay.
They're looking for that gut-wrenching kind of thing. Those are the stories they're running. With all due respect to Anderson Cooper, I like him, that's cool, but okay, we got a minute left here. We need to wrap this up.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to get into that I'll preface for our next show, bring this into, is that there are three things required to make any kind of fire. You need fuel, you need oxygen, and you need spark. And I think that's what's happening. It's a perfect storm for Donald Trump's campaign, and even the backlash that we're seeing with Hillary Clinton's campaign.
There's a big fire burning here.
Oh, there's a huge fire burning.
And the fuel is what's the fuel again?
Oh, we'll get into that on the show.
Okay, all right.
Not to get like Billy Joel, we didn't start the fire, but that's what's going on.
Okay.
Thank you for season 3 for Talking Point Live, coming to you live from the Jeffrey R. Holland building on the campus of Dixie State University. I'm Eric Young.